Hi, everybody. I want to include some videos explaining each element of a short story. Below, I've included some that other people have done that are much more colorful and interactive and nicer to watch than these ones. But I couldn't really find ones on plot and point of view that I liked, so I'm just going to do my own. So you got to kind of put up with my boring, presentation and voice here. So we're going to talk a little bit of plot. And so if you take a look at our document here, explaining what the elements of a short story are, you'll see that it's like anything else. If you're going to retell a story, you'd probably quickly go over the plot of the story, which basically details what happens in a short story. But in literature, it's not only what happens, it's how what happens. There's a very prescribed set of things that happen in a short story that we're going to want to focus on. When talking about plot, sometimes you may have seen something like this that you might have called a plot diagram. Looks kind of like this, goes down. This would be something for a long story or a novel. Our short stories are a little different. They don't actually look like this. So for a novel, this would be this section here would be the introduction. Okay, and it happens probably over a chapter or two. You find out information about character. You find out the setting of the story. You find the point of view. You get a little bit of background as to why things are happening. Then something happens. And in movies are a lot like short stories. I like to talk about, when talking about short stories, reference movies quite a bit. Something always happens, and that's right here. And what this line really represents is the action or conflict in a story. Starts out pretty flat. Things we're just getting to know characters, things happen, then boom, something happens. And we call this the inciting force. Okay, this moment where things start to happen and starts the action rising up and up. And here are elements of rising action. These are things that just kind of start to happen, things that lead up to the climax. And the climax of the story is right here. It is the point of highest action or point of highest interest in a story. And then in a novel or in a longer story, things kind of start to happen. Okay? In a short story, we lose these parts. And the reason why is because a short story is short. A short story plot graph kind of looks like this. You don't really get a long introduction. You get a brief introduction. You might find out the names of characters. You don't really get a lot of background information. Things start happening right away. There still is an inciting force. And this is this point where, it starts the action rising up. If this one event didn't happen, then there wouldn't be the climax. It wouldn't lead up to, what's happening. And sometimes a lot of times in short stories, you don't see the inciting force, but you just know it's happened. Again, talking about movies, this idea that, the movie Avatar, which hopefully most people have seen, the inciting force would be humans coming to the planet of Na'vi to deal with those big blue people in the movie. If the humans didn't come to the planet, you wouldn't have the planet, you wouldn't have the climax. So the inciting force for that movie is if actually humans inhabiting that planet and looking for that special material they were looking for. Then things start to happen. Okay, and then leads up to our climax. The climax is the point of highest action, or sometimes there's not a lot of action in a movie, but there is a lot of interest. Something happens that you want to find out what the result is. Okay, and then in a short story, it usually ends right here. As a matter of fact, I probably drew that wrong. The short story probably ends right there. We end at the climax. Okay, a lot of times there isn't an explanation of what happens after. It's just the story would end right here. So as you can see, we have to know our introduction, our inciting force, and our climax for short stories. That's what I'd like for you guys to know and talk about. Again, falling action resolution happens in longer pieces, but not necessarily in short stories. The big ones are inciting force and climax. In every short story we do, you'll have to be able to identify those two things. And you can see the inciting force is the one event. It's the one event, the one thing that if this thing didn't happen, we wouldn't have the story as it is, and we certainly wouldn't have the climax. And usually has something to do with the central conflict. And we know that the climax is the point of highest action, tension, or suspense in the story. To identify it, you would just simply use a quote. Okay, so that's plot. If we go down to, oops, if I go down to, get out of there, setting. For some reason I can't move my thing. Okay, maybe we'll just do plot for right now. I'll do setting later.